but I actually really think that Tu B'Shvat is really, really, really a fascinating holiday. Very little written about it from a halachic standpoint. I just want to read with you a couple of sources and perhaps find a little bit of insight into the day, maybe make it a little more meaningful, not just Tu B'Shvat, but life in general, and especially trees. First of all, it begins with source number 1. The Mishnah on Rosh Hashanah says, Arba'a Rashi Shanim Haim. So there are 4 New Years. B'echad b'Nisan Rosh Hashanah Lamlachim v'Laregalim. The first day of Nisan begins when we count the years that a king rules, or the Shloshet Regalim. B'echad b'Elul Rosh Hashanah Lama'aser Behema. The first of Elul is Rosh Hashanah for Ma'aser for an animal. Those are Rishon Amrim B'echad b'Tishrei. B'echad b'Tishrei Rosh Hashanah L'Shanim V'Lashmitim V'Liavlav L'Ntiyot V'Lirakot. First day of Tishrei is for the years Shemitah, Yovel for saplings and for the vegetables. B'echad b'Shvat Rosh Hashanah L'Ilan. K'divrei Bat Shammai. Hillel says that it is Tu B'Shvat. So we hold as Bet Hillel that there's something about Tu B'Shvat is Rosh Hashanah L'Ilan. So what exactly does that entail? So if you take a look at source number 2, Aser Ta'aser Kol Tuvotcha Zaracha Yotzeh Sadeh Shana Shana. We are obligated to give Meiser on our fruits every single year, actually on some of our produce. And how are we supposed to know what year our fruit is from? So comes along the Gemara in source 3 and says the following. Ilan Shechanato Pirateha Kodel Chamishar Shal B'Shvat. If let's say you have a tree, let's say a pomegranate tree, and the leaves, its fruits begin to bud before Tu B'Shvat, mit aser l'shana shavra. It is the tithing of that tree belongs to the previous year. Achar chamish sashar b'Shvat. If let's say it begins to blossom after the Shabbos, mit aser l'shana haba. You count the meiser not for this year, but for the next year, which is meaning 16 months from now, or 8 months from now, when that Rosh Hashanah. So we see something fascinating. It's very, very strange. Why is it that it's very counterintuitive? I don't understand. If it's blossoming now, meaning if it's blossoming on next Tuesday, one would think that it should belong to this year. Why is that? Meaning, why all of a sudden are we saying that Tu B'Shvat, and the way a fruit blossoms establishes the year? If it blossoms this year, it should be this year's. Why are we saying if it blossoms next week, that's not this year's, it belongs to the following year? Very peculiar. So I think there's something actually very deep that's going on here about the trees. And that's the following. We know, the question is, where is the source of the life for these trees? And the answer is the water. So here we go. If you were to, those of you that were in Israel, if you were to jump on an airplane and go to Israel, are you going to see a lot of trees that are actually blooming this time of year? No, absolutely not. It's the winter. Despite what? Very few areas. Despite the fact that we sing the song Hashkedia Parachat, who wanted to sing some songs tonight, right? Hashkedia Parachat. The Hashkedia is not Parachat in most places. Maybe if in a very late year, the Hashkedia will be Parachat on Tu B'Shvat. But most years, it only snowed in Israel a couple weeks ago, right? It wasn't long ago that it was snowing on the ground. Nothing is blooming. So, what the Gemara is actually saying is that you don't understand. What gives the koach to this tree to bloom is the water. And the question is, what year did the water come from that was able to produce this bud? So it's like this. If the tree began to blossom already now, before Tu B'Shvat, so we see it belongs to last year. You know why? Because it's actually blossoming, not because of this year's water, because of what happened a year ago. And you know what happens? If you have a tree that begins to blossom starting next week, it's not because of the water from this year, right? But it's going to require next year's water in order to properly survive, in order to flourish properly. And so I think what we see from here is, and you got to know what your things are, because you want to know you're not allowed to give meiser on something for a different year. Everything has to be according to its year. So comes along with Moshe Feinstein, source number 4, and says, you know what's amazing with Tu B'Shvat? Listen to this. Amarti, Tam al simcha betzim v'shigam ata anus mechim b'Rosh Hashanah. Why are we happy about Rosh Hashanah? Who cares? Asher hu shayach rak l'dinei maser. It only really matters for maser. What year does this tree come from? She'ein masri mishana al chavarta. You're not allowed to give maser from one year to another. You have to give maser for that year that the species belongs to. Shina yadua she'shevet Levi lo nato nachalav v'chol yisrael lachu nachlatam. Shevet Levi didn't take any portion of their land, right? The Jewish people had, the Shvatim, the other Shvatim had their land. Ve'im ken be'etzem masrot shenotunim lahem eino tova meha Yisrael be'etzem elo chova k'schirut. If, let's say, for example, the Goldberg family. The Goldberg family was part of Shevet Yehuda, had a vineyard, had a pomegranate orchard, and they had to give pomegranate. Now, who does the Meiser belong to? The Meiser belonged to the Kohen, because the Kohanim, they didn't own property. So what really happens, as Moshe Feinstein, is you were obligated to give the tithe of those trees to the Kohanim, not because it was a nice thing to do, because you were obligated to do it. It was as if you're like holding on to the produce for the Kohanim for them. And eventually, what are you going to do? You're going to give them what really they deserve and what is theirs. No one, you can't, give it to whomever you want and whatever you want to do with it. It belongs specifically to a purpose, for these Kohanim. And the Rav Moshe Feinstein says, we learn from here a very important lesson. The lesson that we learn is that what? Certain things belong to certain people. And there's value to recognize that, sometimes certain things don't belong to us, they belong to others. And in life, I think this lesson is powerful. Why? We sometimes think, we live in the world of instantaneous information, right, with the internet. So we think, what's the cause of something? What happened? Must have happened last week. But here we have an amazing thing. Here's a tree. And you know why this tree is blossoming? Not because of the rain from last week, not because of the rain from 3 months ago, because of the rain from a year and a half ago. That's what's causing it to blossom today. And in fact, it doesn't even belong to this year, it belongs to a totally different year. Right? The flowering of this fruit is not because of what happened last week or last month, but what happened months and months and months and months ago. That's the year that it really belongs to. So if you take a look at Rav Moshe Feinstein, he goes on to actually say the same idea by tzedakah. Here, look at that last paragraph. You should mix one year from the next. Every year, make a calculation. And there are people that are very meticulous, and they say, look, the secular year, usually it's go by the secular year from a financial perspective, right? I know how much I made in 2012. The year is now over. The books are closed. The clients have paid me. Now I can tell you how much money I made in 2012, and now I can tell you how much money I'm obligated to give for tzedakah. I don't know at the time how much money is going to come in and what's going to happen. It says in Moshe Feinstein, that is the way it is by trees. We learn from that Hilchot tzedakah. So again, what seems to be some innocuous, strange line about, meiser for a tree actually has a very practical value. We have to recognize that sometimes certain things belong to a certain year, even though there might have, perhaps the water came from a different year. Nonetheless, when it comes to Hilchot tzedakah, we have to make our calculations per year and how much money we're obligated to give those poor people on a year based on calculations. He says, if you make this calculation every month and every week, that's even better. So you can do it every day, that's amazing. That's for sure better. We learn this in the laws of Tu B'Shvat. And so too, what can we turn to God? And we can say, Kodesh Baruch Hu, if this is what you've given us, continue to bless us with this amount every so often. So it's an amazing thing. Says Moshe Feinstein, the simcha, the joy, is actually giving to others. And that is the joy of Tu B'Shvat. I can calculate how much I have to give to another person. What greater simcha is there than that. That is the hidden joy of Tu B'Shvat. Because after all, the Shkedia is not parachat really on Tu B'Shvat. What is parachat? I can begin to understand what trees belong to what years. I know how much to give other people, whether they're kohanim, whether they're poor. That is a tremendous state of simcha. Okay, let's continue. Also, perhaps another practical way of looking at Tu B'Shvat, source number 5. The Gemara in Rosh Hashanah says, a person who plants, a person who grafts, erev shvit, 30 lifnei Rosh Hashanah, al toloshan. Okay, if you graft something before 30 days before Rosh Hashanah, it actually counts for that year. If it's been because for 30 days something's in the ground, it's considered already for the previous year. Less than that, it doesn't count. It's for the next year. The fruit, meaning it's a machloket in the Gemara. Let's just explain something. When you plant a fruit tree, and the tree produces fruits. So the question is, what's considered the year of the tree, and what's considered the year of the fruit? Why is this important? Most trees actually don't produce fruit the first couple of years. And we know that the first 3 years are actually the fruit are considered orla. The 4th year is netta ravai, which is not very complicated because you can't bring netta ravai because you have to bring it to the old city of Yerushalayim when there's tons of Beit HaMikdash. So you're not allowed really to eat the fruits of a tree till the 5th year. Now, in theory, if the 4th year you get 2 crops out of the same tree, which in Israel can happen, can't happen really in North America. If you get a double crop, so it's the 2nd crop of the 4th year, you could actually benefit from. But not all trees, depends where. That's like you have to know a little bit of agriculture for that. So what I'm trying to say is you need to know what year are these fruits. So says this opinion of the Gemara that if when it comes to orla, take a look after those 2 dots. Upera nitya zo asurin. That even if you plant it, you can't eat it until Chamisha Sabishvat, im lo orla, from the Revi. Doesn't matter if it's year 3 or year 4, you'd not be allowed to eat it. So if this is considered year 4 of the tree, you have to wait until the following year. And when does that 5th year kick in? Not in the beginning, you have to wait till 2 Bishvat. Says Rashi, even though we hold that the first day of Rosh Hashanah, the first day of Tishrei is for planting, it's 2 Bishvat, which is, shall we say, the birthday for the trees. It's already considered a tree. The fichach. So even though it's the 5th year already by Rosh Hashanah, you're not allowed to eat the fruits till approximately a few months later on to Bishvat. The Gemara it's a Mishnah. I want to read you a Mishnah that I actually was talking about with someone last night. The Mishnah Orla says the following: Ilan shenekar va'asela imo. So a sela, in this case, you don't have the source, so I forgot to include it. A sela is actually a clunk of dirt. So here's the situation. I have a tree. I have a sapling. Now, if you want to make sure that your sapling is going to survive, you actually don't plant it in an open field. Why? What's going to happen in an open field, a small little sapling? An animal will eat it, the wind will destroy it. So what do? You grow it not in an open field, in a greenhouse. In a greenhouse. Even in the times of Chazal, that's what they would do. What would happen? After a few years, you then would uproot it, and you'd plant it in a field. So the Mishnah asks a question. When you uproot a tree, a sapling, and you're going to replant it, all those years that it was sitting in your greenhouse, whatever they cut it in those days, do those years count for the age of the tree? Or no, the moment you uproot it, you lose your years and you recount again. Everyone hear the question? So the Mishnah says, it's the Mishnah in Orla, it's Perak Aleph, Mishnah Gimel, Ilan Shenekar, a tree that's uprooted, Vasela Imo. And here, Sela doesn't mean rocks, it means there's dirt and earth with it. Right, a clump, so we'll use this as an example, right? Here's our mango, right? I'm uprooting a mango tree. I'm not just uprooting the mango tree itself, I'm uprooting a lot of the soil that's underneath it. Im yachol lachiot. If in theory there's enough soil that this sapling, this tree could survive, it's viable, then you're patur. meaning you can count the years that it was sitting this whole time in this greenhouse. V'im lav chayav. If let's say there's so little dirt with it that you're replanting it, it's almost as if you're rebirthing it, so to speak, because it's almost like dead because it had very little soil to survive, and you got to put it in completely new soil, then you got to count your years again. So the Bali Musar learned from here something very important. They ask a question: what's your soil? We are often uprooted from place to place. Maybe it was seminary, maybe it was university, maybe it was high school, maybe it was this neighborhood, right? If you don't bring your dirt, if you don't bring the past with you, right? If you don't bring what you learned in the past, whether it's your family, whether it's your Masorah, whether it's whatever the case may be, if you think you can just go and remove all the dirt and survive with just a tree and a couple of roots, you're totally mistaken. You need that clump of dirt, you need that mound in order to have an effect down the road in the future, right? And then interesting, so it seems to take a very simple halacha in the laws of our law, actually I believe has tremendous insight. That you have to be able to, if you want to uproot something, if you want to uproot somebody, if you want that person to survive, you have to take a substantial amount of soil with him or with her. But by itself, just with the little roots, it's just not going to make it. You have to be able to, the roots are sitting in or earth, or grounded in earth, or grounded in soil, that has to come along with the tree as well. Okay. Why specifically, if we take a look at source number 6, why specifically do we consider this Rosh Hashanah Ilanot? So the Gemara seems to imply in source 6, Rosh Hashanah Ilan, my time. What's the reason? Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Oshia, Ho'il v'yatzu rov gishmei shana v'adayin rov tekufa mi b'chutz. The answer is, you know what? By this time, most of the rain has fallen in Israel. There's still lots, hopefully. There's Hashem, a lot more rain to come. But since the majority of rain has fallen, therefore, we're saying as if, okay, it's now time, hopefully there's enough water in the ground. The soil has been dampened enough to have the trees start to grow. In order for the trees start to reawaken. Rashi, Shekvar avar rov yimot gshamim shehu zman revit va'ala hasraf bilanot. It's starting now. The trees are starting to relive again, right? And the trees have an ability to begin to sprout, to begin to grow, to begin to blossom. And this, by the way, is also an amazing idea. The world literally is dead in the winter. Winter represents death, right? Now in Toronto, this death is a lot longer than many other places. That being said, I learned with somebody in Ottawa, a student of mine who's in law school there, and he took a picture of his phone, with like the weather, and he showed it to me. It was minus 27. What was the night, like 2 nights ago? It was minus 27. With the wind chill, it hit minus 40. And I told that to someone, they said, that's nothing. Winnipeg hit minus 50 what? 2 nights ago, right? That's crazy. That's just not normal. Winter is dead. You're just dead, right? Like, nothing can, minus 50, nothing can live. If you,
I think I can live minus 50. No,
what?
I think I could live in there was a warning under minus 25, which was a couple of nights ago. In 5 to 10 minutes, any exposed skin will be frostbitten.
Will be frostbitten.
So, like, you may as well be on Mount Everest. Like, that's it.
Yeah, it's just so, it's unbearable, the winter. And by the way, I'll tell you what's amazing. We all know this is going to happen. Fast forward 4 months from now, 5 months from now, we're going to see trees are going to be blooming. We're going to hear the chirping of the birds. The days are going to be much longer. If you take a look at a lot of the, one of the ideas I think behind Tu B'Shvat is the very beginning of Tchias HaMesim. It's the beginning where if enough rain fell, the earth, the world begins to wake up from its slumber and from death. Right? To remind ourselves, I think, that even though when times look really bad and really bleak and really dark and really cold, right, it's not going to last forever. Tu B'Shvat is that day we begin to turn the corner. I don't know about Toronto, but in Israel already, it's still the middle of winter, but it's past the midway point of the winter. From a halachic perspective, this is about all the Shulchan Aruch writes about Tu B'Shvat, source number 7. Nahagu shelo lipol al pneihem. He doesn't even say chov. He says there's a minhag not to recite Tachanun on Tu B'Shvat. This year it's on Shabbos, so we're not going to say Sikar Chatzedek or Avarachamim. That's about it. And the Mishnah Berurah says, you know why? It's a Rosh Hashanah la'ilanot. It's a machloket about the mincha before. For our case, it doesn't matter this year because it's Friday, so we don't say Tachanun anyways. Most places do not say Tachanun even on the day before Tu B'Shvat. Comes on the Magin Avraham and source number 8 and says, Siman Kuf Lamed Aleph, but Tu B'Shvat no hagin Ashkenazim. There's a German custom. La Harbat b'mine perot shal ilanot. The Magin Avraham, 200 years ago, said already there's a custom to eat. This is before GNF. There's a custom to eat fruits. Fascinating. And by the way, in Europe, let me tell you, right? I'm not saying it's cold as Toronto. I mean, certain places are cold as Toronto, right? But it's pretty cold, right? Russia's colder. I don't know. Germany's not cold as Toronto. No, Germany, Poland, maybe. What? Yeah, Poland. Poland is freezing. Poland's pretty cold. So, well, we see that this minhag began to eat fruits on Tu B'Shvat, and comes along the Hasidic and the Kabbalistic masters, and they totally transformed Tu B'Shvat. Take a look, according to Kabbalah, source number 9. It's called, the Sefer is called Pri Jul. Mori Zal, my master, Haya Omer lechavein ba'achilat pirotehen. They have kavana when they would eat their fruits. Letikun chet Adam Harishon, to correct, to fix that original sin, asher chata bepirot ilan, where they sinned with the fruits of the tree. Ki av kol yemei hashana kol kavanatenu letikun zeh. Even though, our whole year we're metaking that sin, exactly what it's referring to, we call makom chaviva mitzvah b'shata. A mitzvah is more beloved at its moment. Zeh hayom tchila v'rosh perot ilan. He says this is the beginning of the perot ilan. V'shirli akvar hodanu b'kam makomot ki yesh b'koach hadibur liyot moreh koach b'dokif. And then he talks about the idea of how we can awaken, from a Kabbalistic perspective, all the shefa, God's shefa in the world, and the whole idea of blessing to the world. We can be reawakened if we focus on these ideas. So this is what he says. U'minhag tov. Next paragraph. Lo hochim v'tamim larbot b'perot betzem hayom hazeh. It's a day to eat fruits. V'lomar divrei shirat v'tishbachot. To sing songs and praises. Kasher hakti l'chocha v'mesher madita. My friends and I would do. We'd hang out. We'd have a good time. V'imki b'divrei kitvei harav. I want you to read this Hihiratz. Listen to this Hihiratz. I just want to say it tomorrow night. Hashem Elokeinu Levatenu Shebekoach Segulat Achilat Aperot Shenachal V'nevarech Alehem. Which is interesting. We're going to eat fruits and make a bracha over them. Ata Vasher Nege Besod Shorshehan Ha'elyonim. The secrets of their roots, but interesting, Shorsheim Elyonim, these upper roots. Asher Heimat Tluyim Behem, Hashpi Alehem, Shefa Ratzon, Baracha V'Nidava, V'Gam Hamonim HaMishtarhim Alehem. These are the Kabbalistic types of ministers. Yitmalu Me'oz Shefa, Hudan Lashuv Shanim, L'Hagdilam, V'Hatzmiltam, Merishita Shana, Achita Shana Tova, Livracha, L'Chayim Tov V'Shalom. So this Yihiratzon, He's talking about that God should give us a bracha of by the fact that we are eating these fruits and we're making a bracha over them. The Ben Yishchai had this bracha. Look at this bracha. This is wild. That now on Tu B'Shvat, we're saying we want a good etrog. In 6 months from now, 8 months from now, we want to make sure that we're going to have a good kosher etrog. That is what we say on Tu B'Shvat. V'yotzim etrogim trovim yafim udarim v'nekiim mikomum v'lo yaleh behem shum chazazit v'yesh leimim v'lo yeh behem shum chisaron v'afilu akit tzarkot. No blemishes on my etrog this year. No marks. You know what I mean? No nothing. Again, what do we see from here? That sometimes what happens today can have a tremendous effect on what's going to happen 8 months from now. There's always a debate. We just, as you're familiar with, we just had the Israeli election this week, right? So whose fault is it when it comes to the economy? Do you blame like a government that was in power for the past 6 months or for the past year? Sometimes governments, they just inherit the mess from the past 5 years, right? Economic policies that are decided today are often not going to have an effect for years and years and years to come, right? Europe, for example. Europe is suffering tremendous amounts of debt because of its policies for the past 10, 20 years. It doesn't happen overnight. That country goes bankrupt, right? But there's social policies. They just give money, like they have women give birth and you get like full wages for like 2 years, Or like the government has to provide you with, this? There was someone who worked in Hillel and she was from Europe. And she didn't understand that you have to pay for glasses. Because in Europe, everyone gets free glasses. And everyone gets free dental. So there's not you have to get a special dental coverage. So the problem is things cost money. Now you understand why countries in Europe are bankrupt, right? What? That's why the Europe. That's why England is voting to get out of the European Union. Meaning things that you do have a tremendous effect down the road. Choices that you make, right, in life have this ability, the ricochet effect. Who knows what's going to happen? Again, not to focus on the here and now. Ezehu hachacham haroed hanolad will be able to realize ramifications in the future. That's, I think, what part of Tu B'Shvat is. What's happening now is going to have effect even on my etrog in the following year. So here's an interesting pasuk in source number 11, and I wanted to ask, how would you translate the second half of this pasuk? I'm going to read the first one. Let's go to the second one. Ki tatzor el ir yamim rabim l'lachem aleha letofsa. So you're fighting a war and you put a siege on a city. Lo tashchit et etza v'nadech alav garzen ki mimenu tochal v'ato lo tichrot. What aren't you allowed to do to their fruit trees? You're not allowed to? Can't cut them down. Now, how do you translate this part of the pasuk? Ki ha'adam et hasadeh lavo mipanecha b'matzor. How would you translate that last phrase? Ki ha'adam et hasadeh lavo mipanecha b'matzor. What does that mean to you? Ki ha'adam et hasadeh lavo mipanecha b'matzor. What does that mean? So the Rishonim are split. How do you translate it? So either this is read with a question mark, or it's with an exclamation mark. Meaning, is it read because man is likened to a tree in the field? Therefore, you shouldn't cut down the trees of the enemy because it's like a human being. How's it like a human being? Because it could provide food, it could provide something for you. Others say, no, what are you talking about? Ki adam itzasadeh. No. Man isn't like a tree. Man's a higher level than a tree. So if man's a higher level than a tree, for sure don't cut down a tree. Right? Because you got to understand the value of human life. So the Rishonim are split to understand this pasuk. There's a whole school of thought that wants to say, believe it or not, that human beings are compared to trees. The Pirkei Rabbi Elazar says, Adam nimshal la'etz, shenemar ki ha'adam etz hasadeh, and quotes the pasuk in 11. So where do you compare a righteous person to? Tzaddik, katamar yifrach, ke'erez balvanon yishkeh. A tzaddik is like a tamar, like a date tree, right? We see that tzaddikim are compared to trees. Tamar yifrach, ke'erez balvanon yishkeh. By the way, what's interesting about they say about a that about a date tree is really neat, because a date tree, what happens if it's very windy outside? What happens with a date tree? A date tree actually moves side to side. But a date tree, the roots are so strong that it doesn't snap.
Aren't date trees palm trees?
Yeah, palm trees are strong. Yeah, palm trees are strong. I mean, they're thin, but they're... So what's interesting about a palm tree is that no matter how windy it gets, they don't just snap off. Miami, right? But the amazing thing is they might move, they might sway, they might give a little, but they don't break. That is the idea of a tzaddik. A tzaddik has an ability, no matter how many winds it's being beat up by, so it can move, it can sway, but it never actually breaks. That's the idea of tzaddik. So take a look at source 13. Kol shechachmato murba mima'asav, a person whose knowledge is greater than their actions, lemahu domeh, what they compare to, ilan shanafav mirubin, a person whose trees, branches are many, v'shor ashav muatin, and their roots are muat, are short. V'aruach ba, wind comes, v'krato, and uproots it, v'choto al paneha, and literally takes a tree and tops it over. That's when a person whose knowledge is greater than their action. Aval, says the Perkei Avot, Perek Gimel Yazayin. Kol shema'asav merubin mechachmatav. A person whose actions are greater than their knowledge. Lamahu dameh le'ilan shenafav muatin. To a person whose branches are short, meaning branches are a person's reach. Branches are a person's knowledge, sorry. V'shorashav merubin. But the roots are long. Roots, I guess, are like a person's actions. Right? They travel. Shafilu kol aruchot bolam ba'ot v'noshavot. Wind comes and it might move back and forth. En mizizino tolamakom. It is firmly rooted. So again, we see here that the Chazal were not afraid to compare. Torah giants, the people who are righteous, to trees, because they see the beautiful value in a tree. I'll give you another example of really what's neat about a tree. Shechianu. We recite Shechianu on a good carrot, or cucumber, or a tomato. Why not? There's something about fruit that Chazal saw and said, no. The first time you have that fruit that season, Shechianu, you recite a Shechianu. You do not recite Shechianu on a great piece of steak, on fish, on a great, whatever it is, on bread. Shechianu is about the fruit. Chazal saw something special about fruit. If you understand fruit, it's almost as if you have a greater understanding of God's world. You know, you take a look sometimes the way fruit works, right? You take like the stem. How in the world, I never understood this, how in the world does the stem of an apple know exactly how much water to take in to be able to grow, right? And fruits, which are sweet, and they have these like, you know, you have like these covers of a fruit, like it's as simple as an apple, right? Had this skin over it, which protects it and makes it shiny, right? And keeps it juicy inside. Like, how do they do that, right? You know, I never understood that, right? But there's something about the way fruit is created, right? With the seeds and with the blossoms. There's something about it that Chazal were mesmerized by, right? Think about the bracha that we recite. So it's true, on many brachot we recite on your typical, you know, Borei Nefashot. But when it comes to the Shivat Haminim, so we recite a bracha me'ein shalosh. It's almost like a mini benching, right? You have grapes. You're talking about Yerushalayim, right? Because you had grapes, or because you had pomegranates, or you had dates, or you had figs. There's something about the Shivat Haminim. The Gemara says, I actually heard this. I actually never found this Gemara, but I heard this many, many years ago. Sometimes you show me, I've yet to find it, but it's out there. The Shivat Haminim actually cannot coexist. Right? It's kind of like Israelis. Right? They have more parties in Israel than Israelis in Israel. And, right? Like, it's hard, you know, one party which one year is like falls apart, the next year they're kind of like prime ministers. Only in Israel that could happen. Right? So the Shivat Haminim, you have certain, all of a sudden, you have certain fruits that require certain winds and temperatures, and those exact same winds and temperatures actually will destroy another one of the species of a Shivat Haminim. Yet, they somehow manage to coexist in Israel. Right? Which is totally counter. There's something about the fruits which almost, you know, you're able to produce these fruits even though it almost doesn't even make any sense whatsoever. So I think when we look at specifically the trees, and what's amazing is that you see life really being reborn again in the world of fruit, And in fact, the definition halachically, it's interesting. Might as well put a piece of halacha. What bracha do you make on blueberries? Do you make a bori priya adama, or do you make a bori priya eitz? So believe it or not, blueberries actually have the status of a fruit. And the reason is because they grow on their blueberry bush. Right? Blueberry bush is around 10 to 12 inches, right around a foot high. So therefore it's tall enough halachically to be a tree. And the actual, the blueberry bush, when it actually dies, it actually goes into the ground, and those same roots actually sprout again, which is what you need to have the definition of a tree. And I think the blossoming of the year produced a sense of awe and inspiration for Chazal, and that's why they really looked at fruit, and they looked at the B-Shevat from a Kabbalistic perspective as something that's very powerful. Just want to end with maybe one thought from Rav Kook. So Rav Kook says, there's a very strange midrash in the beginning of the Torah that says the following: the ground sinned. Actually, what does it say? Is there a I'll look it up. The Torah says, Hashem said, you should create eitz. I think I've mentioned this before. Etz oseh pri. Ground that produces a fruit. A tree that produces its fruit. In the end, what happened? It's etz oseh pri, meaning it's a tree that has a fruit. What was the original intent, according to Chazal? That the bark of a tree would taste like the fruit. Right? So Rav Kook says, what does this mean? A bark that tastes like the ground thinned and now the fruit tastes good and the bark doesn't? What does this mean? So Rav Kook said that in life we have this terminology called fruit of our labor. Right? To get to that end product, to get to the fruit, everybody really likes. Let's use an example of a program, of a wedding, right? The actual program, the event itself is amazing. It's so much fun. It's enjoyable. But the planning for that is often a nightmare. Ups and downs, and you collect money, and you're complicated. And this, all the such a headache and a half. The means don't usually give you satisfaction like an end. But ideally, what's supposed to happen in the world? You're supposed to have the same inspiration from means and from an end. And I think so. We see here that Chazal looked at fruit, right, as something which could really almost teach us a lesson of life. And I think that's the beauty of the Pirot HaIlan, that Chazal, again, were inspired by trying to look for messages and trying to look for meaning in the world around us, and specifically in the area of fruit. And I think that's what really makes B-Shevat very, very special. So Moshe Feinstein looked at B-Shevat as a way of reminding ourselves that everything has a time and everything has a place, and connecting it to the laws of tzedakah, that you have to realize what year things belong to. You can't mix in one year from the next. Sometimes we look at, in a modern context, and also as an application, as we said before, it's not about today and yesterday, but sometimes it's about what happened 6 months ago, or 2 months ago, or 6 months from now, or 2 years from now, or years from now, whether it's the economic situation. And at the same time, I think it's a nice idea that we said about Orla. You have to take the clunk of dirt with you, the mud with you, and you don't recount the year of the tree. Right? And in human life, we have to remind ourselves when we go somewhere, when we begin a new stage of our life, we have to take sometimes things with us. We can't think that we can just kind of, cut everything from before and expect to start again and everything will be okay. No, not true at all. We have to take what we've gained from the past and move it forward with us in our lives. And Kabbalistically, they saw the idea also that we'll get a good, done for a good etrog. That through the extra recitation of brachot, it'll be a tikkun for Adam HaRishon. Oh, by the way, I didn't mention this. Why tikkun for Adam HaRishon? Because the simple interpretation is that Adam HaRishon ate from the tree. No, but you don't understand. What does it mean, he ate from a tree? Adam was told, don't eat from the tree of Eitz Hadat. What happened? He ate from the tree of Eitz Hadat. He went after his passion, his lust, right? The idea of self-control. What's the tikkun of self-control? It's kosher food. I was doing a bracha before food and after food. Right? Adam saw something. He saw it was shiny, and he was listening, was talking to him, and he took it, or whatever. She took it. He took it from her. Right? But it's the notion of just going after your passion, just going after your desires. Life, it's true. You gotta have passion, you gotta have desires, but it's about the right time, the right place for everything, and the ability to channel it. So what do we say on Tu B'Shvat? On Tu B'Shvat, we're going to take these fruit and we're going to make a bracha. We're going to say we're going to enjoy the world that God gave us, a beautiful world. And I believe you say fruit is beautiful. No one's ever said that cucumber. That's a beautiful cucumber. Right? You don't talk like that, right? Right, but you can say it's a beautiful fruit, you know? I think even vegetarians don't talk like that, I don't think. Right? It's for sure not someone like me. But, you know, fruit, I mean, you see these, like, stars, these are cool. They're like Chinese. There's really neat stuff out there that's that are fruit. Vegetables have some cool ones, too, but you know, fruit's way better. And they saw in this fruit this ability also to do so much and have to teach us so many lessons if we just open our eyes and try to look for inspiration. I think that is the idea of Tu B'Shvat, and specifically it was a tree that's connected to the human being, and I think that's an amazing idea. And just to end with this Maharal and Netzach Yisrael that I just stumbled across, it says the Maharal, V'met Adam Nikra Eitz HaSadeh. A man is called Eitz HaSadeh. Dichtiv ki Adam Eitz HaSadeh. Rak Shu Ilon Afuch. A human being is an inverted tree. Ki ha'etz shorsho lamata. Takua ba'aretz. A tree, the roots are firmly fixed in the ground. Ve'ilu ha'adam shorsho lamala. But a person's roots, their roots are really in heaven. Ki ha'neshama hu shoresh shalok. So a person's soul is a person's root. Vehi min hashamayim. And a soul doesn't come from the earth, doesn't come from the beast, doesn't come from the ground, but it comes from something which is elevated. So when a human being acts like an animal, they act with their passion and their instinct, then they are acting like from the earth. When a human being tries to be a little more elevated, right, recite a bracha before you eat, be able to make proper decisions, calculated decisions, right, trying to look for inspiration from means and from ends, then we in fact become human. We draw inspiration from something elyon and not from the ground. Harigalim hem anafim al ha anafim. That our hands, right, are like the branches. Gufo ikar ilan. The lama hu ilan afuch. Why are we turned around? Ki ha'etz shorsho lamata. Ki etz chayton min ha'adama. Va'adam chayton nishmata min hashamayim. And why we like this reverse tree? Because a tree and its roots are in the ground, and the tree receives its nourishment from the ground. But a human being hopefully can receive this nourishment from Shemayim, from something a little bit elevated. Although we are compared to a tree, there's obviously that major difference. We have to remind ourselves where we're getting our energy from. It shouldn't be from the ground, it shouldn't be from earth. Rather, it should be from things that are a little bit elevated. And hopefully the inspiration from Tu B'Shvat will be able to continue to help us throughout the rest of the colder weather. And just like the trees hopefully will begin to blossom and to sprout, so too the world around us, in the physical world and the spiritual world also will begin to blossom. And even though when nature is dead, and sometimes our souls are a little bit dead, it's part of life. We have ups and downs in life as well. Just like the world will become reawakened, so too if our souls become a little bit tired and cold, hopefully they too can become awakened as well. I mean, it's also a message of Tu B'Shvat. Thank you.